Hiya everyone, welcome back to Runderground. My name is Matt. Now you've just come into this video without knowing what's going on. I am running the overground section today from Watford Junction down to Euston, but I'm splitting it into two parts. With the first video, I finished at Wembley Central. This video, I'll be finishing over at Euston. So if you do want to check out that video, check out the cars up here and rewatch that first and then come to this video. Some things to note about Wembley Central. Well, you can probably tell by the area in particular is that it has been massively developed recently. There was the original station building, but that has been knocked down. It does actually have a secret platform. There was somebody on Reddit not too long ago who had spotted this out. It was actually on platform 6 or behind platform 6. There hasn't actually been a definitive answer from TfL. But yes, the next stop is Stonebridge Park. So we just got to Stonebridge Park station. Now, when the Bakerloo line ran up to Watford Junction, it was scaled back to terminate at Stonebridge Park from 1982 to 1984, and then after that point it has been re-extended to Harrow and Willesden, where it still currently terminates. As we're coming up to HARLESDEN, we've got about 12.3 kilometres remaining. Now as we get to HARLESDEN, there is actually one thing to note. It's not to be confused with another HARLESDEN station that was in the area. There is a small section of track that branches off from Acton Central and it terminates around like Cricklewood, Euston sort of area. There are plans to reintroduce this section of track and bring it back into passenger use, and it'll be called West London Orbital Railway or West Orbital Railway, which basically means there's another part of the overground which hopefully may be reopening soon. As a little stat update, 5 kilometres have elapsed and we have just under 10 kilometres remaining. So far, so good. There did actually used to be mainline platforms here, similar to the ones up at like Bushy and like Harrow and Willesden. However, when the electrification upgrade took place on the West Coast Main Line, those platforms were demolished. And it was because there used to be a curve of track in this area, so in order to straighten the tracks out, that's why they'd remove the platforms. There are potential plans about reintroducing the platforms for the West Coast Main Line, and it's because of Old Oak Common. Once that station opens as part of HS2, as part of the London Overground and Crossrail, I don't think it'll be long until the platforms here are reintroduced to connect with the hub that is going to be Old Oak Common. Again, who's to know what's going to happen in the future? You've got the emblem for the underground as well as the overground, which makes sense because those services stop here. However, what's interesting is that they've got the national rail symbol, even though last time that I checked, they don't actually have any national rail services. I mean, you could argue that's, you know, for the London Overground, but then they would just have the Overground, so it doesn't make sense why that thing is there in particular. That's unfortunate because I can't read. Now I've come to a quieter part of Kensal Green Station, and there is a thing that I did want to talk about here. See, this station in particular, back in 2006, a passenger named Thomas Ap Rees Price had unfortunately lost his life here due to being robbed and murdered by 2 people on the platform. Now the station at the time, it was unmanaged and the gates were left open so anybody could walk onto the platform. Now the Mayor of London at the time, Ken Livingstone, he made it very clear that for any future rail franchises that they must commit to having the station managed until the very last train leaves so that we don't have circumstances like that happen again. I know it's not the most pleasant of stories, but it is very important to talk about. Queen's Park is our next station now. It's about like 500 metres from here. Back in 1915, it did serve as a terminus for the Bakerloo line. However, it was then later extended to terminate at Willesden Junction the same year. This is becoming like a Bakerloo line video, isn't it? all the Bakerloo line facts. There were mainline services that used to stop here back in 2013, although they'd stopped. With the Grand Central services that were announced from Euston to Blackpool, they were going to call here. Well, in fact, the services may have terminated here as they're doing all of the works around Euston due to the pandemic that we're in right now. Unfortunately, that jeopardised the business case for it, and so Grand Central has unfortunately reversed their plans to serve Blackpool. Now at Queen's Park, the Bakerloo line veers off and heads towards, through Zone 1, through central London, terminating at Elephant and Castle. However, there are no Bakerloo line trains that go any further than Queen's Park and go to Kilburn High Road. Or do they? Well, actually, yes, they do. However, it's not for passengers. If you're a local at this station, you might have noticed the fourth rail that goes to Kilburn High Road. And it's because you sometimes get Bakerloo line trains that reverse at Kilburn High Road to go back towards Queen's Park. Now, there is about 1, maybe 2 services a day that go from Queen's Park to Kilburn High Road on the Bakerloo line, and it's called the Rusty Rail Service, and it's to keep the fourth rail clean for Bakerloo line trains. I just know everything, what can I say? Kilburn High Road Station, formerly known as Kilburn and Maida Vale Station, is interesting because that station in particular suffered a similar fate to Willesden Junction, with that they used to have mainline platforms, but then due to the electrification of the West Coast Main Line, those platforms were demolished. This area in particular, it kind of reminds me of a mix between Barbican and like a hotel, like villa. It feels very European. We just made it to South Hampstead station, one of the lesser used stations on the London Overground, and it's because you've got the nearby Swiss Cottage station on the Jubilee line, and so in order to avoid the interchange at Euston, a lot more people go to the Jubilee line station to skip that altogether. I'm actually really surprised that this station isn't used by more passengers, considering that this is a Zone 2 station. I mean, it's just quite surprising. So we're going to be heading over to our next stop and our final stop today, which is Euston. But as a way to wrap up this run today, before we get to Euston, we're going to pass through the lovely Regent's Park. One moment you can be in front of, big expensive housing, and then literally across the street that you're in what I assume is a council estate, and it's quite jarring to go from one extreme to the other. So here we are at Euston. I just stopped the watch, 15.2 kilometres. So from Watford to Euston is the busiest rail corridor for mixed rail traffic anywhere in Europe. You did used to have the Euston arches, which if you want a similar representation of what they look like, if you go to Birmingham Curzon Street, they do look very, very similar. There are actually plans, once the HS2 works have finished, they are planning on replicating the Euston arches again basically as a way to say sorry for destroying the old one. If you want to see more details about this run, you can follow me on my Strava. I look forward to seeing you next week for Underground. See ya.